Okay. All right, I'll call the August 25th, 2020 study session to order. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
The record will reflect that all members of council are present.
All right. First item is clarification of items on the consent calendar. Mr. Herdman, do you have any items that you'd like clarification on? Mr. Duffield? Ms. Brenner? No. Ms. Dixon?
Nope.
Mr. Muldoon?
Yes, one, more for the public. Mr. Mayor, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
Item number 13. Staff on that is Mr. Tran.
Okay, so item 13 is the Back Bay Landing Development Reimbursement Agreement with Bayside Village Marina LLC for environmental review, permitting, and design services.
Whoever, Mr. Webb, you'd be great if you want to answer the question.
Yes, how can I help?
I guess that there is a reimbursement agreement that's put into place, correct?
Yes, it is. That's tonight's action.
Okay, and just so that those at home understand, the city is essentially paying, well, could you just explain? It's interesting, it's got a great history to it, and it just involves public funds, so I just want to explain.
Yes, we were approached by the developer. The city currently has a project to replace several water lines across our bay. This project involves relocation of one of our major water lines that runs diagonally across their project. So they would like to come into a reimbursement agreement with the city so that we can work jointly with them as we go through the permitting process to also permit the relocation of this line. They'll pay for it. This reimbursement agreement only covers design at this point, and we look to bring another one later if it's successful to get permitted for construction.
And it's been in place since 1930, correct, this easement?
Yes.
Does it, where exactly is it?
So this water line, if you're familiar with that corner, runs diagonally from basically Bayside and PCH diagonally across to right across from Castaways, right through the middle of their property. And we have an easement, and again, it's been in place since 1930.
Does it go underwater at all? I'm just trying to picture.
It actually goes under the bay from their property and comes up at Lower Castaways on the other side, and then runs into Dover.
Okay. Just thought it was interesting for those who might be curious about that. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Avery.
And item 10.
Okay, so item 10 is the assessment district number 111 and underground utilities district number 22.
I'm going to excuse myself, Mr. Mayor, due to conflict. Thank you.
Go ahead.
I also need to recuse myself due to real property interests.
All right. So just a second, Mr. Webb.
So I'm a fan of undergrounding for a variety of reasons, and I just think this is a big number item. Obviously, looking at it on consent, just a little explanation and where the money's coming from.
So this item tonight has to do with a continuation of undergrounding of Balboa Boulevard. If you recall, we just did phase 1 from Coast Highway down to about 36th Street. In this project tonight is phase 2 that goes from 36 down to about 21st, depending where the boundary on phase 3 is. And also it has a residential 20B undergrounding district right along the ocean side included. And that's why the big numbers there. We have 20A funds, which are city-directed funds. The council gave us direction how to spend that. We have resident funds coming in, too, to pay for their portion of the undergrounding.
They've been waiting for a while.
They've been waiting quite a long time. We've had a lot of great, in Diane's district, a lot of success on the other side. Those 116 districts that just got done, and a lot of happy people were looking forward to getting this one done. Plus, it'll really help clean up McFadden Square, a lot of poles and everything up in the commercial district there.
Right. Great stuff. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just say kudos also on the 28 funding discussion. It's an amazing thing when we are able to find purchases that end up saving hundreds of thousands of dollars on that. So it's one of my favorite things to see.
Thank you, and I have to give Mike Sinacori a lot of credit. He's a bird dog on that, really pushing along to find any money out in the other cities that he can get.
That's fantastic. Thank you. And any other? Nope. Okay. All right. Just a moment. All right, we'll bring Mr. Muldoon back in. All right, we'll move to item number 2, the introduction of homeless liaison police officer Cynthia Carter.
Thank you, Mayor O'Neill, members of City Council. It's my pleasure to introduce to you today our newest homeless liaison officer, Officer Cynthia Carter, and I will tell you a little bit about Cynthia's background. And I can tell you right away, she has hit the ground running and just doing an outstanding job. And she comes to us from the Santa Barbara Police Department, where she started her law enforcement career in 2012. She came to us in 2015. Great experience in Santa Barbara, also great experience here in Newport Beach, working with our folks that are experiencing homeless here within the city. Cynthia comes by way of Southern California, accomplished student athlete, volleyball player, University of West Texas A&M, where she graduated with a Bachelor of Arts degree in political science and criminal justice. So again, high standard that was set for her by Tony Yim, who's now a sergeant, was promoted, but she's been doing a fantastic job, hitting the ground running and really investing in our homeless community and making some impacts right away. So it's a sincere pleasure, and I'm very proud of the work that Officer Cynthia Carter has been doing.
Officer Carter, anything you'd like to say?
I'm just really happy to be here.
Actually, at the base of that mic, there is a little button. Yeah, there you go.
Oh, there we go. Now I can hear myself. Very happy to be here and happy to be working for the city of Newport Beach and the residents that live here and anybody that comes and visits.
Fantastic. So we might get a couple questions. So
course.
Ms. Brenner first, and then we'll go Ms. Dixon.
I'd just like to say that Cynthia came in and just really hit the ground running with our homeless ad hoc committee. And you've been so engaged with them. And this weekend, you were totally on top of it when I was sending emails about a homeless situation down on the peninsula. And I felt so confident knowing that you were aware of the situation and were really doing something about it. So I think we're really excited to have you here in our community.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Dixon.
Well, I'll just echo those words. I, too, have heard excellent comments about your quick reaction and to the situations, particularly down on the peninsula, and also really overall with your involvement and leadership and city staff, we are truly moving our homeless off the streets and getting into areas where they have either the hotel room or county service or ancillary services. So the numbers are really being addressed, and I want to thank you. And as representative of that district, I'm very grateful, as are the residents. So thank you for your continued good work. I appreciate it. Welcome.
Thank you.
Mr. Muldoon.
Thank you. So, Officer Carter, are you from Texas or you just went to school there?
I just went to school there. I was recruited to play volleyball.
Oh, great. So you know the no grass rule they have at A&M, correct?
West Texas is it's like a satellite school, kind of like the UC system in California. So I think there's 12 different universities. I was up in like Canyon, Texas, which is near Amarillo.
Okay.
So a little different, but
Well, they got the great tradition at Texas A&M, the sister school of you, where you can't step on the grass at the university. They yell at you if you do. So I expect you to bring that sort of regulation spirit to the city of Newport Beach. We have great officers here. It's great to have you here. And as you know, your position is very special because you're the first to interact with people who are in need of help. So I wish you the best, and thank you for joining us.
thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. It's so far so good. So we'll keep the progress rolling. And yeah, it seems like Texas weather a little bit in Newport these days. So
Absolutely.
yeah, we'll see if we can get back to our mild climate. Any other questions or comments? Great. Officer Carter, welcome, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we'll move to item number 3, which is the Superior Avenue and West Coast Highway intersection improvements. Mr. Webb.
And thank you, Mr. Mayor. On this item, as well as item number 4 and the previous item on the conflict, my conflicts are related to business interests and telecommunications. In these two specific items, there's undergrounding or telecom license spectrum components, so I will be in the back for this part. Thank you.
All right, go ahead. Mr.
Yes,
Webb.
good afternoon, Mayor, Council again. This is an exciting project. This is a project you have seen before. This has to do with the bridges over Coast Highway and Sunset View Park. Exciting news tonight, one staff will be telling you about. This has to do with item number 12 tonight on your agenda under consent that has to do with accepting an additional OCETA grant money to do the second bridge. We also want you to look at the first bridge again. There's some information and direction we need from you on that. So I'm going to turn it over to Andy Tran. He's our senior engineer and project manager on this. And also tonight, Jim Houlihan, our deputy director and city engineer, is here to answer questions.
Andy, could you just wait just a second? I apologize. I just realized I forgot to do public comment on item number 2, if there was any. I apologize, Andy. Just 1 second. Did we have any public comment on item number 2? No. Okay. Sorry about that. All right, Andy, come on up.
Here we go. Pardon the interruption. Slideshow. There we go. One up. Okay. Sorry for the delay there. Good afternoon, Mayor O'Neill and members of City Council. Again, my name is Andy Tran I'm a senior civil engineer with the Public Works Department. First of all, thank you very much for the opportunity to discuss some recent developments on our very exciting Superior Avenue and West Coast Highway intersection improvement project. This project is located at the busy intersection of Superior Avenue and West Coast Highway. The proposed improvements are comprised of 2 separate projects, which are the Superior Avenue Pedestrian Bridge Project and Parking Lot Project, highlighted in blue, and the West Coast Highway Widening and Pedestrian Bridge Project, which is highlighted in green. And the primary purpose of this project is to improve circulation and access for both vehicles and pedestrians, as well as provide additional parking, especially for visitors to Sunset Ridge Park. The environmental documents and conceptual design were both approved back in November of 2019. And as you may recall, this project involves constructing a new bridge across Superior Avenue, constructing a larger replacement parking lot with 130 parking spaces, as well as extending Sunset View Park with additional passive use area. We are currently in the final design stage. Construction is scheduled to start in the fall of 2021 and should be completed by winter of 2022. As part of the conceptual design process, we did evaluate several bridge alternatives and ultimately selected a 3-span concrete bridge. We selected this alternative primarily based on the common construction method, minimum maintenance associated with concrete structures, as well as for its cost effectiveness. Although this design does meet all design criteria and standards, this design does require the construction of 2 concrete columns on Superior Avenue, as indicated with the red arrows below there. So during the final design process, our consultant did come up with an alternate concrete arch bridge design. This alternate design does share the same advantages as the previously approved 3-span concrete bridge. It also involves similar construction costs. In summary, this design replaces the two concrete structures with a structural and aesthetic concrete arch, And in doing so, we would be able to eliminate the possibility of any vehicles hitting those concrete columns as they traverse down Superior Avenue. And we were able to verify that the height of the structure will be similar to the 3-span concrete bridge, which kind of assures us that there won't be any additional view obstructions. And staff did have the opportunity to share this alternate design with the City Council Working Group, and collectively the group was supportive of this alternate design. So staff does feel that there is a lot of merit with this alternate design, and we are recommending to proceed with final design and construction of the concrete arch bridge. So here's a rendering of the concrete arch bridge. This is a view from Sunset Ridge Park. And again, this is a single-span concrete arch bridge without the need for any mid-span supports. And here's another view of the concrete arch bridge, and this one is from West Coast Highway. I do want to point out that with the approved conceptual design, we did include a staircase from the parking lot down to the West Coast Highway sidewalk. This temporary staircase eventually would have to be removed in order for us to construct the West Coast Highway Bridge. So now that the West Coast Highway Bridge project is approximately 2 years behind schedule compared to the Superior Avenue Bridge project, staff thought that it would be a good idea to not construct the staircase and save ourselves about $200,000 in construction cost. And in the interim, pedestrians would still be able to use the sidewalks on Superior Avenue to access the parking lot as well as the new bridge.
Stay right there for a second. Ms. Dixon.
Oh,
Thank you, Mayor. I want to talk about the staircase. I thought the original idea to include a temporary staircase made sense, so now I'm questioning. I certainly love to save $200,000, but it's going to be, as you'll get into this presentation, a while after the Superior Avenue Bridge is built before this Pacific Coast Highway Bridge is built across Pacific PCH. And so I'm concerned about the pedestrians who are still be in the crosswalk, walking across PCH for that period of time. And then if they want to head over to Sunset Ridge Park, they're going to either have to walk up the hill and around and about to get to the parking lot to go over the bridge, or they will probably choose to walk across the Superior crosswalk, defeating the purpose of the bridge because would be a delayed pedestrian crossing. So I'd like to know more about the staircase. I understand because of the temporary or the widening of PCH right at that location. I understand that. I just think it's going to be an inconvenience and then defeat part of the purpose for maybe several years until the PCH bridge is built, when pedestrians can cross over and just join into the Superior Bridge. So do you have any other alternatives, or is this the only thing we could do?
Short answer would be yes, we can easily accommodate the staircase for this design. Just for clarification purposes, though, when we were working on the conceptual plan for the Superior Bridge, the West Coast Highway project was non-existent. So we didn't know whether it was going to be 5 years or 10 years down the line. Now, as you'll see when we get further down in the presentation, we did recently receive grant funding, which we kind of have a timetable now. We think the West Coast Highway widening and bridge project is approximately 2 to 2.5 years behind schedule compared to the Superior Avenue Bridge project. And in regards to the crosswalks will not be removed as part of the Superior Avenue Bridge project. It can only be removed upon completion of both projects.
Sure, I get that.
Yeah. So if we want to entertain including the staircase as part of this project, that is very easily doable. We can easily incorporate that also. We just thought, again, on our side, maybe it was incorrect for us to assume that $200,000 for a 2-year interim bridge might not be a good idea, I guess.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, your assumption was a good one, but the reality of the functionality of keeping pedestrians having to cross, we've already determined that it's really not a safe crosswalk. I mean, it could be improved, and for a lot of reasons, traffic flow, et cetera. And so we're just going to be needing to keep people on the crosswalk when there's a bridge there, because they don't want to walk clear around there. Did you want to comment, Mr. Webb?
Councilmember Dixon, if it might, I was just thinking when Andy was talking here, we could probably, looking at that corner, we could create an alternative bid item. So when we go to award this project, it would have an item to build that staircase. And when we bring that to council, we could show you kind of what that looks like. And if you want to spend whatever the money is at that time on the alternative bid, you could make the decision then because we'd know more about phase 2 where we're at. But if that works for you, I'll have staff go ahead and have the designer put in. It doesn't have to be a really expensive permanent structure, just something we know that's going to be there for a few years. And then we have the choice later to include it in the construction or not.
Right, well, and that was your original thought when you put a temporary bridge or staircase in that plan, and then we pulled it out.
The last design had more of a permanent, more expensive, elaborately designed one. But I
It
think
doesn't
we
have
can
to
come up
make it
with
just
something.
be temporary.
So let us work on that. We hear
Yeah.
your thoughts, and we'll see if we can address
Okay,
that.
all right, thank you very much.
Hang on just a second. Mr. Avery? Mike.
Is about the Coast Highway and the widening and sort of the lanes and the ramps and all that, and maybe I should hold that until you get into that part of the presentation.
2 slides.
Okay, great, thank you.
Hang on one second. Mr. Herdman?
I know something that would help me in making that decision would be to understand the usage of that crosswalk from one side of Superior to the other. My guess is that it's not used very heavily,
It actually is used quite heavily.
pretty heavily
Yes,
now.
correct.
But with the redesign, with the bridge,
With the redesign, and I will get to all these points in about 3 slides, but with the bridges in place, there won't be any crosswalks there for you to use. You wouldn't need the crosswalks as you can use the bridges up top. So,
Yeah, I know. I'll just say real quick. I know we're about to start talking about the PCH bridge. There's a part of me that is concerned that it's going to take longer than a 2-year interval. And if it ends up, so the question would be, how long would it take for us to justify the temporary stair structure? So if it's 2 years and 200,000 is not worth it, what about 3 years? What about 4 years? And part of it is because I know we're going to talk about this, but part of it is that second span is much more complicated than the first span, and that's why we're breaking it up into these 2 phases. So if we end up in a situation where, yeah, we're hoping for a 2-year interval, but if it's much longer than that, at what point does it make sense for us to have that temporary? It sort of strikes me, frankly, that we probably ought to put that temporary back in, the temporary stairwell back in, because like I said, I think we're about to talk about it, but I think I'm perhaps less optimistic about it only being 24 months. So let's go ahead and talk about that.
So right on cue here, we're moving on to the second project. This here is a plan view of the project location. And what you see here is West Coast Highway running in the east-west direction, which is from left to right, and Superior Avenue and Balboa Boulevard running in the north-south direction. The West Coast Highway widening and pedestrian bridge project is highlighted in green, and this is an intersection capacity enhancement project and involves adding a 4th eastbound through lane across the intersection. The 4 lanes would then taper back down to 3 lane immediately past the intersection. And this project also includes the construction of a new pedestrian bridge across West Coast Highway, as well as 2 pedestrian ramps on either side of the highway to connect the sidewalk to the upper bridge elevation. And with the completion of both of these projects, we would then be able to eliminate a lot of the sidewalks on the north side of this intersection, as well as those 2 crosswalks there, which would greatly improve the vehicular circulation, as well as pedestrian safety.
Let's stay there for just a second. Mr. Avery.
So, some residents have concern about widening Coast Highway, obviously, in general. So could you just speak to the reason for the widening? What
Yeah.
specifically is addressing?
Yes, the city was fortunate enough to get an OCTA grant, and this grant program is actually called it's ICE. It's called an Intersection Capacity Enhancement Program. So the purpose of the grant really is to improve capacity through the intersection, within the intersection. So they do have separate programs if you were to, for instance, improve a segment of a highway, which would be the Arterial Capacity Enhancement Program. This is an ICE program, which is the Intersection Capacity pretty much we're just looking at the volume of vehicles that can get across the intersection. So the widening part, again, we are only adding a fourth eastbound through lane right before the intersection, and as soon as you get past the intersection, you can kind of see those arrows there.
Right.
The fourth lane will taper off, and it would go back to the existing 3-lane condition.
So on the east side and the west side, the widening goes away,
Correct.
right? Within what, 100 yards?
Within hundreds of feet, maybe 600-700 feet
Uh-huh.
to taper off the lane. Yep.
Right. And there's no plan at present to continue the widening in either direction?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Ms. Dixon.
Thank you, Mayor. Just some further clarification on the pedestrian bridges on both sides. So we will not have an elevator. I know in the early days that was considered, so that's significant that we don't have to have that operational element. And so the land that we are going to be using there, do we have that land?
This widening will require some minor right-of-way acquisition from the north side. As Mayor Neal just mentioned, this is a lot more complicated because of right-of-way acquisitions requirements. So with this design, we do anticipate needing a small sliver from the adjacent Hogue property, kind of just off the sheet there to the right, as well as the property to the left there, Newport Banning Ranch. Again, these are small, minor slivers, takes that we need.
And the pedestrian bridge is just along, and so handicap access would be part of that
Correct.
slope?
I'm not sure if you can see it there. On the call out there with the new pedestrian ramp, it's a switchback ramp. So as you cross the bridge, you would get to the top of the bridge and walk to the right, and then swing back to the left.
Okay, good, thank you.
All right. Let's go to the next slide then.
So the funding for the design element or design efforts is currently included in the current capital improvement program. The city did recently receive OCTA Measure M Grant 2 funding, which will pay for 65% of the design costs up to $780,000. So with this new grant funding, the staff is recommending contract amendments with our current design team in order for us to complete the environmental review and the design efforts, which totals just under $1.2 million. As part of this grant program, the city is responsible for $420,000, which is the remaining 35% of the design costs, and this is currently available in the facilities financing plan. As we complete the design efforts, staff will continue to seek additional grant funding for both the right-of-way and the construction phases. In regards to the project schedule, assuming that the 2 contract amendments get approved later tonight on the consent calendar, staff can begin the environmental review and the conceptual design next month. And we anticipate completing the permitting, the right-of-way acquisition, and the final design by November of 2023, and ultimately complete construction by March of 2025.
Mr. Herdman.
Can you go back one slide, please? We accepted this grant money, this M2 grant funding, $780,000, knowing that we had to spend $420 million.
Yeah, as part of this grant application process, we were actually required to submit a resolution, which we did back in January of 2020.
Okay.
And in that resolution, it does describe the matching requirements from the city.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Any other discussions on that? Okay, all done, Andy?
I think so.
All right, and
Yes.
you're looking to us, though, for some guidance, if I understand it. Or is it all for item 12 tonight, or do you need any guidance from us?
There are 3 recommendations with item 12 tonight, and again, this is 2 separate projects. The first recommendation is to substitute the approved structure with the concrete arch bridge, and the next 2 items would be to approve the contract amendments so that we can start the environmental and design phases for the West Coast Highway project.
I hate to do this. This might be a question for Dave Webb. Dave, so if let's, Andy, would you mind going back a slide all the way back to the discussion about the stairwell? So when we get to the point, there you go, that one. Thanks. So for item 12 tonight, let's assume for a moment that the majority of council would agree that as we're looking at phase 2 versus phase 1, phase 2 has the potential, if not likelihood, to take a decent amount of time between the completion of phase 1 and completion of phase 2. And we also agreed that the removed staircase should probably be put back in to allow for, as Ms. Dixon was talking, allow for an easier access so that people aren't walking up the hill around. So if you're coming off the peninsula and you're coming across PCH, and you want to get to that, and you want to get up to that parking lot, for example, the goal would be to have people go up the staircase. Is there any reason other than that for the staircase? I guess I'm trying to figure that out as I'm looking at this.
So the staircase would keep you from having to cross the crosswalk to go across the Sunset View and up to the park that way. Or if you wanted to get right up to the parking lot from going up the east side of Superior, up about half the way up to where the driveway is. So it would be a shortcut. It would not, I'm guessing it wouldn't be ADA compliant, so it would help anybody. Bikes and things would still have to go around. ADA would have to go around. But the general walker could walk right up to the top of the parking lot there.
Yeah, I see that. Okay.
So if you like, and we can put that in phase 1, it could be done relatively easy. And what I had mentioned to Councilmember Dixon, if you like, we'll come up with a design. And again, when we come to award it, I don't know how far, it is a more complex project, phase 2. So many wrinkles with Caltrans and things. It could go longer. We're hoping 2 years, but your intuition is right. It could go longer. So I think it'd be prudent for us to come up with a design and give the council the option to award it with the contract or not when we build phase 1, if that brings a level of comfort.
So if we were so for tonight though, on item 12, I'd have to go back and look at it, but is item 12 affected at all by a discussion of the staircase?
It's currently not. You could give us direction tonight on how the staircase is in phase 1. We have, I believe, the design for it is included in phase 1.
That's correct.
So we already have it in our contract for them to do that. If you want us just to include it, we could do that. And it wouldn't take any action on item 12 to do that.
Okay, so in other words, so if we gave direction right now, just via straw poll or something to that effect, on including or not including, then the next step on that would be when the contract is actually put out for bid, and then also and we approve it. That's when you'd include it if we gave you a straw poll saying yes. You wouldn't include it if we said no.
Yeah, and actually to clarify that you've already given us direction to include it. It's in design phase 1. We're asking tonight maybe to remove it. So if you want to keep it in as an option, an item, or just design it in and bid it that way, we could do either one.
Okay. All right. What I'm going to do then is I'm going to go out to public comment. I'll bring it back and let's have a discussion on the staircase. All right. Thanks, Andy.
Thank you.
All right. We'll go out to public comment on this item. First, we'll start in the community room.
Mayor O'Neill, members of the council, this is Jim Mosher. Regarding the Superior Avenue Bridge, I apologize if I missed it. I did not hear a clear statement of the total anticipated cost of pursuing the design and construction of the new arch design versus what the total cost would be continuing with the currently approved concrete 3-part span design. And the second comment I have about that, I apologize if I'm dreaming, but I thought when the council and the other commissions were considering the trade-off between the concrete span and the truss design, one of the considerations was the amount of disruption of traffic and construction time that would be involved. And I kind of thought the concrete span design with its supports could be built in parts and was going to minimize traffic disruption. Could be dreaming on that. But I would be wondering how the arch design compares to that in the amount of time and the amount of disruption to build it. And then finally, I think everybody has to keep in the back of their mind that both of these projects, before they can be built, are going to need coastal development permits. And although the city now has the authority to grant those to itself, this being a major public works project, I believe it can be appealed to the Coastal Commission, who may have their own opinions about the aesthetics or design of the project, which is a problem that needs to be considered. And I'm a little old school. I personally continue to like the idea of underpasses rather than bridges. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Do we have any calls? All right. Hi, go ahead.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. My name is Charles Klob. I'm commenting specifically about the Superior, or the PCH bridge component, and that is the desire to remove the crosswalks there. Given our city's poor history of enforcement, I think we would have a nearly impossible time stopping bicyclists and walkers from crossing on the ground, instead of walking up through that parking lot to cross the bridge, which will take them much longer. I hope you consider that. The drawings look swell, but I think the practice will be that people will continue to use the ground crossing. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other calls? Okay. We'll bring it back up. Andy, why don't you come on up? Was there anything from Mr. Mosier's comments that you wanted
Yes, I think he mentioned 3 questions there. The first one being the construction, or actually the overall project cost for the Superior Avenue Bridge. As we discussed back in November in 2019, the all-in cost for that project is about $8.8 million. That has not changed, other than this potential $200,000 for the staircase. So that portion has not changed. And in regards to the selection of the structure itself, Mr. Mosier was correct. The 2 final structures that we were evaluating were a truss bridge and the 3-span concrete bridge. And the truss bridge would have been a lot quicker to erect, to install. The concrete bridge will take about 2 to 4 months longer. However, we ended up selecting the concrete bridge because of its longevity, as well as the maintenance-free aspect of it.
Yeah, I will also say I think having the pole removed is much improved on the sidelines.
And
Yeah.
I'm sorry, if I may again, and I think there was a third question in regards to the construction duration and the comparison between the arch bridge and the 3-span concrete bridge. They are in essence the same. They both require false work. It's going to take about 14 to 16 months to complete, so no difference.
All right. Thank you. All right, let's bring it back up here. Ms. Dixon, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Andy and Dave, thank you for presenting us with a new design. I think it is an improvement, and we didn't even know we were going to be able to get rid of those 2 pillars, so that's very good. I just want to say thank you. This has been, for as long as I've been on the council, this has been contemplated and desired, and your work with OCTA, I think even Tony Petros was involved in this in his last year on the council. So this has been going on for a while, and it hasn't been delayed as much as just a long, complicated process, and 2 bridge spans over busy roads, busy highway, and getting the grant money. Our staff is so good at securing grant funds that our taxpayer dollars come back to us, so really appreciate that good work, and I'm just delighted to see this move forward. I think one bridge at a time is the right way to go, and hope that we get the first and then followed by the second. And in the next several years, these projects could be completed. But I want to commend you for your good work in pulling this together. Thank you.
Mr. Avery.
Yeah, I think the project has so many dividends for the public, for access, making the park. It's going to make a lot of things work that are not working there now. And so I just think it's great for our city, and it's such a busy intersection, and it's so fraught right now for pedestrians. I do have a question, though, just for fun a little bit. Why not consider an underpass? Was that in the plan? And there must be a good reason why we're not doing that. And catch you off guard.
We did consider that early on in the conceptual design stage, and really right off the bat, the terrain of this area does not lend itself to an underpass. If you know the terrain over there, Sunset Ridge Park is about 20 to 30 feet higher than the highway itself. So you would really have to dig down the 20 feet and then dig down another 20 feet to get down below Superior Avenue, which is really not feasible.
You're already going down Superior.
Correct.
Yeah. Oh, great. Thank you.
Cool. All right. I want to raise the issue of the temporary, the temporary bridge structure. So, or I'm sorry, the staircase. So we had previously approved it. We're having a discussion right now over whether it's it's $200,000. Grace, on the $200,000, we're talking about it coming out of the FFP for parks, if I recall correctly. So it's not exactly general fund money. It's designated specifically for something like this or Grand Held Park or whatnot. So we're talking about, and I used the word somewhat restricted money. And so we're looking at this and trying to figure out. I believe that this would ease certainly people walking over from the peninsula who would be trying to cross over to Superior. I think that people would naturally want to not walk along the street if they can help it. And the question really is, for $200,000, is that worth it for a 2-year period or more? I think the answer is yes. I would like to take as many people off that intersection as possible, frankly. And like I said, I'm perhaps a little more cynical on the 2-year period. I think it's probably going to be longer, given the different agencies we're going to be working with on this. So I think we ought to keep it in there instead of removing it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a straw poll. The straw poll will, if you raise your hand, it would be an indication that you'd like to keep the temporary stairway in place. So at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to ask for a show of hands of people who would like to see that staircase stay in.
That was unanimous, 6-0.
Okay. Do you need any further direction from this, other than the vote tonight, obviously, but any further direction? All right. Seeing none. Thank you. That was a good presentation. All right, we'll move into our last item for study session, which is the parking meter replacement.
Thank you, members. Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council, as we pull the presentation up, we find ourselves at a little bit of a crossroads, and we're looking for your input tonight about our kind of roadmap for parking moving forward. So, as a tourist destination, parking revenues represent a significant revenue source to the city that partially offsets the cost, the impact of tourism on the community. We have 4,100 parking spaces, generates about $8.2 million. Those funds are currently collected by 821 single-space meters, 84 multi-space pay stations, and pay-by-app, which we currently use Park Mobile as the service provider. The problem right now is that many of the single-space meters in the city are increasingly becoming inoperable, resulting in lost revenue, and they're becoming costly to maintain. They're coming up on 10 years old. So this presentation is going to explore some replacement options for the aging equipment. So just to orient yourself, single-space meters, the jargon is the picture on the left. That's uniquely identifies parking spaces and what you see in most cities. Pay stations have become increasingly popular to serve high-demand areas. And then it's been there out for a while, but the ability to pay by app, and it's becoming increasingly more popular. So as you can see, if we look at the Pay by App first, this is trending upwards in fiscal year 18-19. The adoption rate was about 18%. In the fiscal year just ended, fiscal year 19-20, we have about a 24% adoption rate, and July alone, the adoption rate increased to 30% already. So it's becoming more and more popular. So that, in part, creates the dilemma, because that's a truly infrastructure-less option, and as you notice, our single-space meters, which are our most expensive alternative, but in some ways the most convenient, is shrinking to 12%, but as I mentioned, it is our more expensive of the hardware option. And then the multi-space pay stations is currently the piece of hardware that is used most often at the large beach lots, and over the years we've been making more use of multi-space pay stations and decreasing our dependence on single-space meters, consistent with other e-commerce trends. So historically, in 2011, we had as many as almost 1,300 single-space smart meters, and that introduced, prior to that, they were mechanical meters that only accepted coin. The smart meters now gave the ability to accept credit cards and provided real-time information about whether a meter was operable, and so there's much more robust reporting. But you can imagine each one of those single-space meters is essentially like a individual cell connection that has a cell phone out on the street that has its unique gateway to report into the city, and they serve one single space. So it's a very convenient option, but it's the most expensive option. And then we also in 2011 introduced the Pay by App feature as another payment alternative. In 2014, we introduced pay stations to the CDM and Balboa lots, replacing the previously staffed parking booths at those pay stations. Has been, and as you can see by the acceptance, it is the most used of our parking infrastructure. But consistent with the industry trends, the city has been starting to reduce our reliance on single-space meters in favor of the multi-space stations and the pay-by-app, which are much more cost-effective in most situations. So the problem with the single-space meters, they are 10 years old. The current meters that we have rely on a 2G cell service, which may no longer be supported by carriers as soon as December 2020. So we do need to do something quickly. There are battery issues. The capacity isn't enough in some of those areas that don't receive enough solar recharging. They go dead, and once the meter goes dead during the day, a parker is able to park at that space all day, and we miss out on revenues when they go down. They're also increasingly hard to get parts for those manufacturers, and we've done our best with glue and duct tape and scavenging parts as much as we can to keep them running. But it's between the corrosion and proximity to the beach, we're seeing a 30% failure rate on non-reporting meters.
Say that again?
So we're seeing about a 30%, 30% of the meters are failing at any one time. So they're either not reporting, they may be collecting and storing information, but they're no longer connecting to our service, so we don't know that, whether or not they're fully operational or not.
So let's stop there for a second, because that sounds like a problem. I mean, doesn't it? There's two problems there. One of them is that if it's not reporting, are we collecting the money? So that's problem number one. And problem number two is if a parking officer is coming along trying to figure out whether someone is paid for that particular vehicle, if it's not reporting properly, are we giving out tickets improperly?
No, they get to park there free if it's inoperable. But it is possible that it could retain, if the battery dies, it could retain the charge, retain the information, and report out in batch mode at a later time.
Okay.
So 30% sounds alarming, but it is a problem, and it's getting worse. I mean, they're just. I think our best estimate is it's about $500,000 a year that we think we're probably losing at the moment towards inoperable meters.
Okay.
So,
Well,
so it's a problem.
Yeah, hang on just a second. We got a couple. So, Ms. Dixon.
Well, I was just going to ask how much. Well, we could have put in 2 temporary bridges over PCA. Or temporary staircases. Well, anyway, that was my question. That's a lot of money. So I see where we're going with this, so thank you.
Mr. Herdman. Oh, okay. All right. Go ahead.
So I just wanted to draw a quick distinction. There are two components. The smart meters, as I said, are approaching about 10 years old. And on the upper left, you can see that the top portion is the actual meter. The meter housing and coin canister, below you can see the corrosion. Those are at least 20 years old, and they would need to be replaced as well. They're just in a sad state of affairs. So. Something that needs to be addressed. And so that makes it even more expensive proposition when you're replacing both the meters and the canisters.
Yeah, Ms. Dixon.
So the image on the right with the code 9719, wasn't that Park Mobile?
That is Park Mobile, and Park Mobile, so that's the pay-by app, and you can use Park Mobile at any spot in the city, at any city spot in the city.
So, okay, but so that it
Have
is
an option.
cross-functional that way, so that we, at least on those meters, we're recovering through Park Mobile.
If they choose to pay, if it's non-operable.
Oh, all right. Okay, that's a problem. Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. So this is a very generalized map, but you could see, just from the areas of, I don't think it's any surprise to anybody. Most of the single-space meters are on the peninsula, but they do bleed into West Newport. At all the numbered street ends are also serviced by pay stations. And we do, we could pull up GIS maps if you wanted to drill down on those particular, or any particular area that you had questions about. So again, here's the conundrum. Option 1 is replacing single-space meters in housing, or option 2 would be to remove the single-space meters and rely on a combination of pay stations and pay-by-app. And the trade-off there is convenience for if you pull up in front of a meter, it's it's an area that needs to be paid, and it's right in front of you, and but it'll be costly to replace those. So the pros and cons, yeah, we mentioned the customer convenience and familiarity. It has the least amount of change to the general public. The meters can be outfitted with sensors to get some occupancy reporting, so that's one benefit of continuing with single space meters. And it preserves the coin payment option, although that is decreasing as well. It's most people either use credit card or other options. Cons, it's the highest initial equipment cost and monthly transactions. It also has an aesthetic effect of all the public areas, cluttering. So it's much cleaner when you to remove those medians. To remove the single space meters, and that you do have more maintenance requirements with 700 meters that you'd have to go by and either maintain or collect the coin. So the cost of maintenance and operating them are more expensive. So the cost, when you look at the hardware alone, just so this would be meters and 11 pay stations, is about $1.1 million. And then over a 10-year period, between the fees and the transaction costs would be another almost another $1 million. And because we are further reducing our dependence on pay stations, on single space meters, that we would have some increased signage costs associated with the removal of some of the single space pay station, where we're replacing them with pay stations. So it's a total cost of $2.1 million. It's basically status quo with a small reduction of, I think, of about 121 meters in the original option 1 proposal. So option 2 would be removing all the single space meters, and option 2A would be kind of the minimum number of pay stations that we could see to replace the 700 pay stations that are currently included in option 1. And then if we wanted to be a little kinder, gentler, we could add additional pay stations so that the customer wouldn't perhaps need to walk as far or cross the street in order to get a pay station if they had not adopted pay by phone. Of course, if the customer adopts pay by app, there's no need to touch any of the public infrastructure. It's contactless. You just enter on your phone, you put your plate, and you're off and running. And that's available now. We just need to get folks, and really that's the ultimate end game, would be to get out of the hardware refresh, but it would represent a change in our service model.
So you got a few questions. Let me start real quick. So on the peninsula, when you go park on the interior of Balboa Boulevard on the median side, there's no individual pay stations. There's no meter. There's no pay station. It's
Correct.
just a sign that says, how to pay for it there. I mean, it seems like people have figured out how to do that. So
those were our first trial areas, yes.
And how's it
they've
been going?
Successful.
they have been successful.
I mean, you do get occasionally, if you haven't set it up, it's might be frustrating at the get-go to do it on, to download the app and put your credit card information. But once it's set up, it is the easiest way to pay at any of our pay stations, and highly encouraged, especially in the era of COVID-19 and not having to touch any of the public infrastructure.
Yeah. All right. We'll start with Ms. Brenner then.
So my question was, when you look at 1 versus 2A and 2B, you see that 2A and 2B both have reduced expenditures, but on 1, isn't that a recurring expenditure where, like, how do they compare as far as time after time having to go back and spend these amounts of money?
They're pretty comparable. I tried to do my best to strip out any of the costs that were either recurring to date, and so really this should be a pretty good comparison to option 1 and option 2A or B. However, not discussed in this presentation, which would be the third option, which would be to go to Park Mobile only, would be the least expensive because, or at a time, perhaps you're still having pay stations, but you've decided, okay, this is the last time we are investing in pay stations, or we're going to slowly reduce that. Then you can start saving less for their perpetual replacement. So this is assuming a perpetual replacement.
It seems like as the years go by that you're going to be spending less on 2A and 2B than you would if you continually upgraded those meters.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I think it's only a matter of time before there will only be either a handful of pay stations in the city. I think staff's first thought pre-COVID was, okay, we'll refresh the meters one more time, but probably the last time. But now with post-COVID, there's a lot of articles pointing to that, COVID really advanced e-commerce and the acceptance of e-commerce as a way to do business. And so we wanted to provide council this opportunity to consider, do you want to make an expensive short-term investment in single-space meters, or start making baby steps to, let's say, remove the single-space meters and have some combination of pay stations to serve those that, for whatever reason, choose not to adopt pay-by-cell technology.
Thank you.
Mr. Herdman.
Yeah, and I need a better understanding of the estimated monthly fees column, what that represents, what are we paying for, and what does the 10 years mean?
So those represent 10 years of monthly fees, and depending on the type of equipment, there may be a monthly flat fee, like a single space pay station, a single space meter. I believe it's somewhere in the neighborhood of $8 a month, and then a cents per transaction. So that is 10 years worth of fees associated with operating those meters. I'm sorry, we were talking about pay stations in option 2. So this would be
operating the pay stations.
Yes, operating the pay stations would be the monthly fee for maintaining the pay station.
Who are we paying that to?
So that goes to whoever the provider of the pay station is.
And what do they do for that? Make sure it's running?
No, it's essentially part of you buy the equipment, and it's maintaining the back-end infrastructure for communicating with your network and reporting to you. So they get as part of their service model is you have an initial cost and then some monthly cost based on volume.
And if something goes wrong with a pay station, do you pay additional money to get it repaired?
So
or is it included in that cost?
So we have a separate service provider that does the maintenance. If there's warranty, if it's under warranty, then the parts and labor are free. If it's not, then we have to either buy additional batteries and then our separate contract with AmeriPark, they go out and service. But servicing 80 to 160 pay stations is much easier than servicing 700.
And
in
estimated
single
sign cost is a one-time expenditure?
That'd be large, as long as those signs last.
yeah.
Which should
Okay.
be pretty long. But you do, I want to acknowledge that you're going to have to add more signage to indicate you need to pay here because there's no meter that's blatant in front of you.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Dixon.
Thank you, Mayor. So to your point about e-commerce and just how society is moving, the pay station is ultimately going to be obsolete. So the only reason we're including that in this, the prospect of this proposal is as a convenience. Is that it? As people transition, but
Correct. It's a bridge. It's a bridge. You know, and you know there was speculation maybe 5 or 7 years ago that calling for that all infrastructure would be removed within 5 or 10 years. Well, that that was a while ago. That didn't quite happen, but we're seeing it, and we strongly believe, and the numbers aren't compelling to invest in this equipment from a return on investment standpoint.
Right.
The only reason to do it is to accommodate those that may not readily adopt.
so what would be, if we decided no pay stations at all, what's the cost to the city?
Really, the cost of signage and some cost of removal of the meter poles.
But you haven't presented any of the operating costs. We just continue our contract with Park Mobile.
So even for Park Mobile, and I believe our because it's such a cheaper option for the city, we don't have to pay for a gateway, and we don't have to pay for. The city picks up that cost for the consumer, and it's about 9 cents per transaction, if I remember correctly. Is that right? Oh, it's 15 cents per transaction. Sorry, 15.
But that's our only cost. We have no infrastructure, no capital costs.
Correct.
So what we're looking at today is, and the previous slide, how much was that if we decided to go that route?
We have a cost comparison at the end between
All right,
the three
but
options.
so this is real money of $2 million, $1.5 million to facilitate the transition to something that is arguably obsolete today.
Correct.
And so that should be part of our thought process. Park Mobile, I know we've been working with them for a number of years. I mean, by relying on this technology, we're protected if they go out of business or there's a few technology change, for example. I mean, for example, are they keeping us current with new technology options, being able just to hold up your iPhone to
So they're a service provider like anyone else,
Right.
and we can choose, and then they have competitors. And they, what's emerging now too is the ability to provide multiple providers if you like. So if if Huntington Beach chooses a different mobile service provider, they could use that.
But it doesn't matter in terms of, because it doesn't matter. It's just the technology that we're linked into.
It's a service.
So there's no hard cost. There's no hard capital.
Absolutely. So that's why that's the ultimate end game. Right now, it's the service delivery trade-off between folks that may not want to walk to a pay station. It's the education, or just maybe I don't have a smartphone, or I'm just unwilling to download the app and put my credit card information in there. So that's why this is something we wanted to bring in front of council to say, are you ready to make that step?
And these, I guess we have no way of knowing what percentage of our resident population pays into a parking meter, because most people who would be parking on the street probably have an annual permit.
That's a good point, is that if you are an owner of a annual permit, and especially the master permit, then you could do, that's another option, is avoid, perhaps you don't want to use your phone, or you don't have a cell phone, you could come up to the cashiering counter and buy a master permit, and you can park at any of our state spaces legally.
But arguably, we'd be allocating $1.5 million for primarily visitors who are visiting our city. I mean, it's a cost. I mean, they're coming to our city and they're willing to pay for parking. It's just how easy are we willing to make it for them? Kind of a historical question. You've been here a number of years with the city. Could you just explain for our own edification why there are parking meters predominantly on the peninsula? And that's a good thing. It's a good revenue source, and I don't hear any complaints except people using Parkmobile once and then they get it. So I hear no complaints, but just maybe more of a cultural perspective on parking meters in the city?
So especially in the high traffic impact areas where there are predominantly tourists, that is a means to essentially offset some of the cost of tourism to the city. And it's very common to have it in business districts as well, to perhaps maybe limit, also time limit, so you don't have beach parkers parking in front of a store, a retail store for the whole day, taking up that space.
Well, and not to be left unsaid is the benefit to those businesses that the parking meters generate improvement dollars to improve the villages, and certainly on the peninsula that's true, that a portion, not all of it, it's just a very small portion of the parking revenues that come in from the visitors help to replenish the community and pay for ancillary services like sidewalk cleaning and signage and that type of thing, so there is a benefit. But what about Corona Del Mar, and why aren't there really parking meters in Corona Del Mar?
There are some. And Corona Del Mar State Beach generates quite a bit, and there is a small lot, kind of sort of behind Sherman Gardens that also is there, but not a bad way. I suggested a number of years ago, at the cost of rotten tomatoes being thrown at me, but sometimes if you want turnover in front of your business, not a bad while everybody has a bad impression, or if you don't want them parking in front of your house, to have it a paid area and buy it for the resident to buy a parking pass.
Brad, could I jump in ahead of you and answer that question about CDM? We've been very resistant to having parking meters in Corona Del Mar just because of our village feel, and Dan's absolutely right. Whenever the topic would come up, it would be like warfare. So what has happened during the pandemic is that the citizens who live on our residential streets and near Ocean Boulevard have been telling me stories about people who come to Corona Del Mar and are incredulous that they don't have to pay to park. It's like, I think it's even gone out on social media that you can park for free in Corona Del Mar, and it's been not to our advantage that has been happening. So at my meeting on Thursday night, which I'll be talking about later, we will be talking about the possibility of including in our residential parking program having paid parking at significant places in Corona Del Mar. And so I think our citizens are recognizing that maybe it's something that we have to sort of come to the current century on, but in the past, it's just been part of the charm of Corona Del Mar that we had no parking meters. So, and now that we don't have to have meters, I think it might be more agreeable to the citizens to think that we have paid parking without having to pollute the bluff top and other areas with the parking meters.
Good. All right, thank you, Dan.
Mr. Avery. All right, I've got a question then. So if I'm looking at, I mean, there are certain stretches along PCH, for example, where it'd be pretty easy to make sure that if someone pulls up, they can walk no more than, I don't know, 100, 200 feet to a pay station, maybe less. There are other stretches where it's pretty lengthy. And so when you are looking at 54 pay stations, for example, what were you looking at to get to that specific number in order to determine that was enough for people to be able to walk to if they needed to?
So there were certain areas that you pointed to, like along PCH in West Newport, that it really doesn't make sense to put a pay station in there for $10,000 to cover a small stretch, and there's not a lot of demand. So that area along, like some of the medians in Balboa, would be targeted to, say, to be park mobile only. And so we wouldn't, there isn't enough demand and concentration of spaces to warrant a pay station.
Yeah, I'll just say, I think when I'm looking at this and my experience on the peninsula, and then my experience also in CDM State, the beach area there where you don't have individual, you drive down in, you can either use your phone or you walk to a pay station, and it's pretty easy, and people have figured this out. I'd like to go for, frankly, the least costly option on this, because we've seen it work, and it strikes me that even at 54 pay stations, we're eventually going to phase that out completely. So I would probably go option 2A, but we'll have more discussion on that. Mr. Herdman.
Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, but there really is an option 3, and I think Diane was pursuing that, which is the elimination of parking meters, pay stations, and everything, and we go strictly to phone app.
That is absolutely true.
And that would be what we're looking to in the future.
It could be done now. I would consider it sort of the nuclear option. I was trying to have a gentler, kindler customer service approach, but there are cities that have totally eliminated single space meters and pay stations, and really that's the only option. Most cities have an either or. You could choose to pay by phone, but then there are scattered pay stations that for whatever reason, maybe you forget your phone, it dies, whatever, you still have the option to walk down the street and make a payment. But there are cities that, mostly international, where there's neither a pay station nor single space parking meters. And so you've got cities like Dallas and DC and Seattle that are, and San Francisco, that are actively reducing the number of single space pay stations.
Well, we have
single space parking meters.
We had a council meeting a few council meetings ago, and we were talking about the effects of COVID on the revenue in our city, and we're looking at a $33 million loss of revenue, and we're going to have to keep a careful eye on our budget and our expenditures over the next year. And this certainly seems like an option 3 could be implemented and save a significant amount of money. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, any other questions before we go to public comment? I'm sorry, you're not done.
Wasn't done, but I can kind of get there really quick.
Okay, no, go ahead.
So I think we talked about some of the pros and cons. They're there for you if you want to take a look. Any question on this slide before I move forward?
No.
This lays it out in a little bit more detail about the number of pay stations, but I think we talked about difference between 2A and 2B is just the number of pay stations. Funding, we do have money set aside. We plan for the perpetual replacement of equipment, so the money is already there. And so it could be redeployed. And certainly when you go to the infrastructure less option, that would add another 300,000 or 400,000 of money that we currently set aside for either the collection or the replacement of single space meters that could be redeployed to other areas that need attention in our budget. And so the cost breakdown or the cost comparison is here. Option 1 is 2.1 over 10 years. Option 2A is 1.1 over 10 years. Option 2B is 1.7. I didn't cost out what the service option or the signage option would be for the option 3, which would be to eliminate all hardware or keep the pay stations that we have in service and slowly, use them as long as we can. So this is where I'm really kind of looking for your direction, and perhaps this would be an appropriate time to take public comment before you, if I could get a straw vote at the end to give me some guidance on where we're going.
Okay. All right. Seeing none before we get out to public comment, we'll go to public comment on this item.
Mayor O'Neill, members of the council, this is Jim Mosier. When we're talking about parking in the Newport Beach, we're obviously talking about an issue of coastal access. And if it weren't elsewhere, it particularly means that equity in providing access is very important. So I would like to suggest, with regard to the possible nuclear option 3 of requiring all payments to be made through smartphones, I can testify that not everybody in the world has a smartphone. Some don't even have a cell phone. I am one of those. So I believe to provide equity, as Dan alluded to, that option, if ever considered, will need to be supplemented with some opportunity for people to purchase a parking permit in person for cash, not an annual permit, but a day permit or something like that that would allow that vehicle to park at any paid parking place in the city for some time that they pay for. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing none, do we have any calls? All right, let's bring it back. So that's a fair point by Mr. Mosier that I was also going to raise. The other thing I was going to raise is I'd say it's about 50-50 when I'm going to CDM Beach, for example. Like 50% of the time, I've got the data I've got enough signal that'll pull up Park Mobile. 50% of the time, I don't. So I think we're not quite there as a city on the infrastructure side of cell towers, and I know that's. I'm just gonna say we're not there without touching on what that could potentially mean. But I'm concerned that we don't have the data bandwidth inside the city from an infrastructure standpoint to meet the demand of an all cell phone based system. And Mr. Mosier's right. I'm not sure we're going to be there either yet, where everyone has a phone that can do this. So we probably do need to stay in the parameters of what you're describing here first. But to the extent that what we're really talking about is, we've had a fairly successful program in place already on the medians, and I agree. That's why I wanted to ask I assumed it was successful, but it's good to hear it is. And then when we're looking at West Coast Highway, for example, going out from Cappy's out to Frog House, you've got so many single that are so easily removed, and then with one pay station on a block, for example, it's so easy. I'll when we do a straw poll, I'll be going for 2A because it strikes me that we're at that point where most people have it, but for the folks who don't, we can still provide the options. Ms. Dixon.
Thank you, Mayor. So just to parse the options, so the 54, I think with within 2A, we're talking about the acquisition purchase of new pay stations, or have you costed out, as you spoke just a moment ago, retaining, how many current pay stations do we have?
84.
So
this
just
would-
keeping them? Why do we need to replace them? Why not save that capital cost? Keep them until,
Yeah.
and then as they eventually die by attrition, we could decide again whether we need to add more, spend the money for new pay stations, but they probably, what is the expected life expectancy of these pay stations? How old are they?
So there are, the expectancy is about 10 years, if I'm correct. Thumbs up? 7 to 10 on the pay stations. There are 29 of the existing 84 that probably would need to be replaced in the next 3 to 5 years. Nothing, but the 54 would be augmented to our total fleet of pay stations to replace the 700 single-space meters that are out there. So we're not proposing to replace any of the existing pay stations.
Okay, have you done the analysis, just the proximity analysis, determine where the current pay stations are that currently exist, and if all the parking meters were to be removed, are the pay stations or the app a viable alternative?
Yeah, so we've kind of dissected the city and the areas, just looking at the volume of transactions, where it would be most, if it's even cost effective to put a pay station there or go directly to Park Mobile. In some cases, we're going Park Mobile only. And the 54 was based on our outside consultants' recommendation that was kind of the minimum. But Tony, do you want to comment on whether 54 is indeed the minimum, or could we? If I get where you're going, is perhaps we don't even need to buy 54?
Right.
So we came up to the 54 number by taking a ratio of pay stations to number of spaces that they would service. So at 54 pay stations, we're looking, if I remember correctly, it's about 10 to 12 spaces that would be serviced per pay station. And then that's when like Dan had mentioned, certain areas were deemed to be better for Park Mobile because of either the number of spaces and it just didn't make sense to put a pay station there, or proximity and distance to a pay station.
Okay, so let me ask this question. When you're looking at this, were you looking with the idea of trying to temper people's need for going to an actual pay station and trying to change the user experience? Let me ask, I guess, another way to it. You mentioned other cities, Dallas, et cetera. Did you check with cities how they made the transition?
We talked to a number of different consultants that would help those cities, and I think the strategy that we're doing, if you recall the first slide in 2011, we had 1,300. So we are slowly transitioning people away from single space meters currently. But to get rid of the 700, that was Tony's best advice for kind of maintaining the current. But if the direction is to trim that even more, we can take a look at.
Well, to Mr. Herdman's point a few minutes ago, I mean, $1 million is $1 million, and we have a $34 million shortfall. I'd be looking. We were debating a moment ago about a $200,000 temporary staircase. And the world is going to technology. It's not going backwards, it's going forward. So I would, in my thought process, to look in terms of designing this plan. I'm not suggesting we go to cold turkey because there are people who may not have a cell phone, but to go on a more aggressive path, to not be so kind and gentle perhaps, but just be realistic and fiscally prudent, that we perhaps don't need to expend $1 million, that we can communicate through communication on our website. I don't know if there is anything, certainly not on the landing page of our website, that could say Newport Beach is going to be transitioning to an entirely web-based parking system. So please be sure that you bring a cell phone, or some companion brings a phone so you can pay for parking. We could do more to train the visitors that are coming into our city and have a wonderful experience, that we are transitioning to something that many cities have already done. I would just say, let's accelerate that process and to save the city money. Thanks.
Mr. Duffield.
Thank you, Mayor. So I have experienced this in a place where I have another house in Ogden, Utah, and they went exclusively to the app, and I was so upset. I remember the first time I was just mad in my car going, geez, this is horrible. So I downloaded it, I read the instructions, I put my information in. Now it is so easy that it's ridiculous. It knows where you are. You don't have to do anything. You just push. I mean, come on. I don't know anybody who doesn't have a cell. The whole world is staring at their phones, okay? And if you don't have one, your friend has one. I mean, I'm been more listening to this conversation and let's just do it. What are they going to do? You can find a parking place. If you don't want to pay, you can go somewhere else. But you'll know that when you come to Newport, you download the free app and you use your phone. I mean, it's just too easy. And I'm an old fart. I'm old. I don't like this stuff, and it's easy. And
yeah, but the youngest person here is a little more conservative on this, apparently. All right, Ms. Brenner. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Duffield. Were you done? I apologize. Okay, Ms. Brenner.
I had a question about, do maps and other online sources identify where there are these pay stations? If you go, like if I went to Dallas, could I look online and see where there are pay stations if I needed that service? Or is that something we could perhaps have 3 pay stations in town at City Hall and MacArthur and West Newport or something, where it showed online if you really need to pay with cash or something, you can go, and would that relieve our liability with the Coastal Commission, that we advertise that there is a place that people, if they needed to go, could go and pay for a day pass or whatever?
So currently in our GIS system, we have every single meter identified, where there's a parking meter, and we have every single pay station. Now it's driving people to that website. They're usually not going to the city website, but to say, hey, where can I park near the crab cooker? So that has been the dilemma. The information is there. It's an education process. I think for perhaps the older members of the community, I haven't spoken to Laura about this, but maybe we have offer a few clinics about downloading apps and how to specifically do that for the tourists. It's a little bit more challenging. I think it's if they're there for the first time, they would likely get a warning. We keep track of that, and then the next time they'd get a ticket.
So Google Maps doesn't show where there are pay stations?
Google Maps will show where there is parking and what the rate is. There are some other little bit more boutique apps that even tell you where the cheapest parking is, et cetera. But I'm not aware. We could certainly reach out to Google to try to make that in our landmark. But I'd have to confer with our experts in IT on that.
Okay. I agree we're going to get there. I just am concerned about data. I mean, I really am. Like, I think that we've got we just don't have all of the spots in our city covered yet for enough data, especially on high traffic days where we've got a lot of people on the peninsula. I mean, when you add 50,000 people onto the peninsula or more, with cell phones, it starts slowing the network down, and that's one of the reasons we had we've got an upgraded contract with Verizon, and and whatnot to kind of work through that. We're not there with Verizon yet. We're not there with AT&T. We're not there with a lot of them. So the part of the issue, in my view, is I'd love to get to this point. I really would. I just am concerned that we would be causing some major concerns, especially with our tourism community, if we just went straight mobile right now. To the point about cost, 100%, I agree with you on the cost issue. If we're looking at the potential for regaining at least a percentage of that $500,000 by reinvesting and putting it back into the Park Mobile, which my understanding is when we've got Park Mobile, we actually end up doing pretty well on the finance side of that. People actually tend to pay more because they can access it from their phone and then just extend it out. So we seem to be doing better on that front when we have people going more mobile than on the single side. So even if we're able to regain a pretty decent percentage of that, what we're talking about on the cost expenditure side is maybe 3 years of amortization, regaining that in lost revenue. So if we end up in a situation where we're regaining it over a 3-year period in a realistic 7 to 10 year cycle, that's not so bad on the finance side. That means that we're going to be regaining all that and then making more because of it in the future cycles. So a 3-year, and that's a rough estimate, but if we were roughly saying a 3-year amortization on a 7 to 10 year cycle, that's pretty good. So and then hopefully in 7 years, by 7 years from now, we've gotten to the point where a fairly, even an inexpensive phone is fairly ubiquitous, and you've got to the point where you can remove out all these structures before needing to. But at that point, I don't know. I just don't think we're there in terms of the data bandwidth to be able to go all digital yet. We will be. We're just not there. So I still think we ought to go back to, we ought to go to the least expensive option, but I still think 2A is probably where we're at. With the caveat, though, to Ms. Dixon's point, with the caveat, though, that I'd like us to just take a good pencil to that 54 number. Are we sure 54 is the right number? More, less? Take the GIS approach and just figure out, okay, so I understand the equation that you used on that. It makes sense to me. Now, actually put them and figure out where you would put them. And if there are some spots where you say, actually, if we just put it in the middle here, it's an equidistant for a couple blocks, and that's not so bad. Or if you're looking at it and saying, oh man, we have to add more. We just need to know that, and that's okay. We just need to see that. But I think at this point, going to a scaled down approach, having as many people transition over is great. But I think we're at the point now where we still need to have stations for people to pay. All right, with that, I'll tell you what, we're going to go straw poll on 1, 2A, 2B, and you know what, we'll throw in option 3, which is the all mobile option also. Could we put that back on the screen so that we have a view on this? So we're going to we'll start with option 1 when we get it back up on the screen.
Mr. Mayor, could we use the comparative option, where we show all 3 options with the cost?
Or whatever slide helps us differentiate the best would be helpful. Probably not that slide.
Operator error.
Okay.
One more.
I think it is that one. No? Oh, that one. There you go. Okay. All right. So when we're looking at this, before I get there, any questions before we start on 1, 2A, and 2B? And I'm also going to include option 3, although it's not costed out. I think we have a pretty good idea of that it would be less expensive than all of these options. All right, so if you would like to do a straw poll for option 1, go ahead and raise your hand now. I'm sorry. Let's just briefly explain each one, Dan. So option 1 is
So option one would be adding 11 pay stations and purchasing 700 new single-space pay stations.
Okay.
Option 2A would be to remove all the remaining single-space pay stations, single-space meters, and adding 54 pay stations in their stead. And option 2B is something in between, where we, instead of 54, we add an additional 81.
Okay.
So.
All right. All right, so I'm going to do a straw poll now. So if you'd like to see us move forward with option one, go ahead and raise your hand.
There's no one.
All right, if you'd like to see option 2A move forward, please raise your hand.
That would be Mayor O'Neill, Mayor Pro Tem Avery, and Councilmember Brenner.
Okay. If you'd like to see option 2B move forward, please raise your hand.
No one.
And if you'd like to see option 3 move forward, please raise your hand.
That would be Council Members Dixon, Herdman, and Duffield.
All right, so what that means, Dan, is
Okay.
no, it's okay. Here's what it means. What it means is that we'll need to bring this back for further discussion, showing what option 3 would look like, and comparing it to option 2A. So let's remove option 1. Let's remove option 2B from the equation. Let's get a comparison of 2A and an option 3. My recommendation would be that part of the discussion be a GIS location, showing us exactly kind of where we think this would look, where this would go, and the other part of the equation would probably be a discussion about two things. One is coastal, and the other discussion would be data bandwidth in the city. So those are the things that we will need to have further discussion on, but that's why we have study sessions.
Experience from other cities, perhaps?
Yeah, so if we've got other cities, especially those in coastal California, who have, if anyone's gone to an all cell, then we should have a discussion. We should try to do a comparison with what, or at least hear how their experience has been going too.
Mr. Mayor, could we also ask if 2A can be brought down even further? Perhaps we could look at that when we come back.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So 2A through the nuclear option, essentially.
Let's call it option 3.
Okay, option 3.
Just yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
The all-digital city option.
Yeah, the all digital.
So I should have pointed that out before. Carol reminded me that we can't remove every single pay station because state law still requires us to have a payment option. So we might be able to get I don't know what that minimum number is, but we do have 81 in service now, and that might be sufficient.
Sure.
So just fair enough.
Yeah, but we can work toward that. So I guess it's really the kind of the question of 2A versus the lowest possible. Fair enough?
Fair enough.
Okay, we'll bring it back. All right, with that, we'll go into public comments. So public comments on non-agenda items. If you'd like to, we'll start in the community room.
Thank you, Mayor O'Neill, members of the council. I just, as a non-agenda comment, wanted to say that I am pleased to see that despite the council having not met for nearly a month, the city did not see a need to put on the agenda tonight a closed session. I think that's a positive development. But regarding closed sessions, I did want to repeat the comment I made to the Aviation Committee last night, which is I hope the city will be concerned about the closed session that the Board of Supervisors apparently held today, or announced that they were going to hold, which was officially to discuss the rent that they would be willing to accept for the leases for the property on which the new fixed-base operators would go in connection with the General Aviation Improvement Program at John Wayne Airport. meeting in closed session to discuss what rent they would accept is an allowable closed session topic. But we disturbingly heard at the Aviation Committee last night that the true purpose of today's closed session was for the supervisors to meet together with their legal counsel and discuss their response to the city's request for operational restraints or restrictions on the leases that they might issue. I do not believe that was a valid reason for a meeting in closed session. I believe that should have been done in open session, and I hope the city will express some concern to the supervisors about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Yeah, what up, council? First off, my name is Chad Kroger, and wow, this pandemic's still pretty crazy, huh? I mean, seriously, what is going on? Anyways, you guys look good. Tans are popping. So yeah, back when Corona first struck and got Tom Hanks, things were tough. But things got even tougher when the city committed what can only be described as an act of war against the youth. And I think you know what I'm talking about. You guys dumped sand in the skate parks. It hurt. Almost as bad as when Mia Selinsky dumped sand in my heart in 9th grade when she decided to go to Europe for 2 weeks. And yeah, I'm all for safety, but this is a bit rash. And let me be clear, I'm cool not shredding Crete during lockdown. I'm cool not working. I don't even have a job. But I'm not cool with sand in the skate parks. Skaters have been bullied for centuries. It's unfair. Can you imagine the city dumping sand on the tennis courts at Pelican Hill? No. Skaters don't even have an emoji. I mean, you got one for surfers, salsa dancers, even skiers. And thankfully the skate parks are open again and we are psyched, but honestly, I can still hear the sound of sand crunching in my bearings. Skateboarders need restitution from the city so that we can ollie our way out of this conundrum. And there's no better person to propose this olive branch than my dog JT.
All right, go ahead.
What up, council? I don't have an actual olive branch. That was a metaphor for peace. I'm a rollerblader. It's rare to see a blader and skater united for the same cause, but Chad and I learned long ago that we are stronger together. I want to push beyond the sand episode and get to a place where city officials and riders feel like they can coexist at Wahoo's once again. In ancient times, a general after gaining dominion would do a ritual dance with his enemy. We need a gesture like that from the city that lets us know you hear us. That is why we are asking you, Mr. Mayor, to drop into the San Clemente Skate Park Bowl. It would send a message to riders all over that we can trust you. We can only get through things with trust. If you've never done it, don't be afraid. Just dip your shoulder, commit to the drop like you commit to civil service. Don't look down. I feel like all of America keeps looking down. Mistake. Ride it out. It'll be over in a few seconds. And if you forget all this and you brick it, we'll have the same medical team present from the Jake Brown accident. Speaking of symbolism, there is no better day for this to take place than September 4th, 2020, the day Tony Hawk Pro Skater comes out across all platforms. This speech was paid for by Activision.
All right. Probably worth noting we didn't pour sand in any skate park in Newport Beach, but congratulations on your Hulu deal, gentlemen.
Skate or die.
There you go. All right. So any other public comments in the community room? All right. Any calls? All right. All right. Go ahead.
This is Hoyan Yip. Good evening. I have a comment about parking meter. I was not quick enough to get through this public comment session, or maybe Jim Mosher didn't speak long enough. So I also would hope the city would support 2A. The reason is, actually, it's not a personal reason. These days, we read quite often that some families don't have internet access, so kids are having a problem, just different problems with not having the internet access. So those people, they also have the right to come to the beach. So with that kind of people in mind, I think we need to have this pay station for a little longer until it's not a problem in the state anymore. By the similar token, it's like the handicapped access. Most people are not handicapped, but we provide this service to them. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other calls? All right, we'll bring it back up. So it's 5:50 right now. We're going to take a recess and what do you think? 6:05, 6:10? All right, we'll restart at 6:10. All right, thank you very much.